On tonight's program, we talk about new revelations and how Foundry work is done.
Keep in mind that Geko is design, and while design sounds like art, design is like, taking assets and getting everything to fit together.
We review the new Federation tutorial.
It seems to me like an opportunity to draw together all of the aspects of the Borg that are right now not particularly well connected.
And Season 8 storytelling techniques. Could some of it be used in Foundry missions? So yeah, I mean, I'd say there's things you can do outside of the game that can be fun. I was thinking of, for my relaunch of the Descent series that I talked about earlier, I was thinking about making a whole website for it. Join us on the Foundry Roundtable. Hello and welcome to episode 39 of the Foundry Roundtable, the podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogan1701. With me is highly trained mime, Greendragoon. Well done. And also poorly trained circus tiger, Hippiejohn.
Rar. Grr.
Say it loud, say it proud. Grr. And R&B artist in training and our guest tonight, CaptPFDennis.
Hello, and good evening.
And we start tonight with some random advice I came up with while watching TV. If you have recurring characters in your Foundry missions, don't kill them off between episodes. This has happened on a couple of BBC shows I've been watching recently, Being Human and, what was the other one? Primeval. You come back from the end of a season, you get the season premiere, and then you find out in the first episode that a character from the last season has been killed between seasons, off screen. And the characters mention it, and then they sort of go about their business and never mention him again. And I'm like, okay, what the hell?
Well, you know why this happens, right?
Yeah, because the actor isn't available or doesn't want to come back or gets fired.
Yeah, nobody intentionally writes this. It's the best we can do since we don't have the actor anymore.
Mm-hmm. But I still say, I mean, if you're going to kill a character, do it on screen. And of course, for us, we have no excuse because we don't have to pay our actors.
What they should do is write into the clause of the actor that they have to come back for at least one episode.
Mm-hmm. Well, I liked what J. Michael Straczynski did on Babylon 5 is he wrote in advance an exit for each character should the actor no longer want to play that character. So, like Ivanova's promotion, Talia's crazy brainwashing thing, all that he had in advance. So I like that. But, I think if you're going to kill off a character and you want it to have a lot of impact, I think you got to do it on screen where people are going to see it and be able to react to it.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
And of course the other extreme, if you're going to make a major event out of the death of a character, you should make sure that character is in the spotlight so that we're engaged and we actually care about them. I was watching a Canadian TV show called Flashpoint, which I think I mentioned last time, and they killed off a secondary character who had barely any screen time and almost no focus whatsoever, and they tried to make a big deal out of it. But I think it kind of flopped because, we were 20 episodes in. The guy had been on the show since the pilot, but I barely knew his name.
Right, you weren't invested.
Yeah, I wasn't invested in that character. If they had killed off any of the other characters, it would have a lot of impact. Now, you might say, hey, Drogan, didn't you do that same thing in Purity 6?
I haven't played it yet. No,
I don't
All right,
think
I won't spoil it, but, the idea wasn't necessarily to make a character a real connection with the character that I killed. It was just to up the stakes of the mission itself. That, oh no, now people are dying.
That's how we lost Walsh.
That's true. That's very true. In Serenity. So, anyway, on to the news. Obviously, as everyone knows, we're in the middle of Foundry Downtime. Began last Tuesday when Season 8 launched. I probably know the answer to this, but how have you guys been spending your downtime?
Dinos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Killing dinosaurs.
When I'm in game, it's killing dinosaurs. Yeah.
I think
I will admit to not spending as much time in game though.
I've been taking advantage of the featured episode Moby deal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's nice.
Anybody been writing scripts for Foundry missions? I've been doing a little, not very much.
I did a little bit of something related to writing. Specifically, one of the authors has been putting together basically a parser for the export file that the Foundry will spit out.
Yeah, how's that going?
Well, he was kind enough to, as Dom Perk was the one who's been working on this, and he hasn't released it yet, but he's been kind of looking for tested, so I gave him a copy of my export file from part 2, and he was kind enough to run that through, and it seemed to go fine. The order of everything, I mean, it's very nice. It actually formats everything, all of the
the question
dialogue
is sort
boxes.
of what does it look like on the other end?
Yeah, he does it as an HTML file, so it's all organized into tables. So yeah, it'll have the title and the dialogue, and then the choices, and it'll show you which choices link to where, with a numbered index. The only downside is that because the exporter kind of exports things in order of how they were created, it's a little bit haphazard in how dialogue boxes spit out. So you still kind of got to search through to find, like if you're looking for a specific dialogue box. But I mean, otherwise, I mean, it's definitely a much more readable version.
So it kind of does it in the order of like it is when you click on the dialogue tab, right? Because those are in the order of when you created them.
Yeah. So I mean, if you ever tried to find a dialogue via the dialogue tab, it's a bit like that. And of course, there are multiple kinds of dialogues. There are dialogues that are in the story tab, and there are dialogues that are in the map tab, and those are kind of separate and all that good stuff. So yeah, the export file is definitely extremely difficult to read through. This makes it a little bit easier in that it formats everything nicely. So you're not staring at a bunch of nested brackets.
Well, it's a pretty good tool for looking at your script after you've put it in. Like if you wanted to go through and revise things, obviously, I think I assume you'd have to copy and paste it all back in dialogue tree by dialogue tree. Yeah.
I mean, if you're going back in, but what you can do is like bring it into Word or something like that, and then have it spell check. And
that's good.
Obviously, you'll have to go find each instance back in your mission, but I mean, it definitely is a great way to kind of quickly find them.
Seems handy.
Definitely.
Yeah. But I mean, this is still kind of a work in progress, and as far as I know, he hasn't actually released it yet. So I think he's still kind of working out the last few kinks and making sure that it doesn't break.
Well, I say as long as it doesn't alter any game files, it should be okay as far as scripting goes.
No, and in fact, it has absolutely no impact on the game whatsoever.
It just takes the output file that we can already make, right?
And
that we've been able to make that from the start. It's just been hard to do it.
And nothing it outputs goes back into the game.
Right.
Good. That should be allowable. Well, as soon as the Foundry comes up, I think the big thing we'll all be looking at is this tagging system and how it's actually going to function in the live environment. Mm-hmm. And whether people are going to actually tag things, is it every player going to tag my mission the way I think it ought to be tagged, or, are they going to have completely different, is one person going to think it's a combat mission and one person think it's not?
I'm sure that's the way it'll come out.
I mean, yeah, but I think
it'll be self-correcting though.
Yeah, if you get enough of a sample size.
And, I mean, I know a couple of people have kind of, poo-pooed this, but I do think it's better that the author doesn't.
Yeah, I'm actually fine with that.
Yeah.
Myself.
But I mean, yeah, it would just become another case of, basically like with the fleet system where everybody tags everything. So this way, at least there's a certain amount of accountability in the average.
Yeah, it's up to the general population to decide what a mission is.
Right. And that's, you're going to find those people who can't be bothered with it. Like they can't be bothered leaving a review. They'll play it.
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
Move on.
We've always had
changes.
That. Nothing changes that. Of course, the other thing we're getting is Voth mobs. And we actually found out from one of Geko's many interviews that the follow author system was planned for Season 8, but was disabled because it wasn't working correctly.
It wasn't ready. It wasn't working right.
Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully they fix that soon and we get that, because I think that's going to be cool.
Yeah.
We also learned something interesting in that Geko interview, which he said that his team really isn't responsible and I think possibly not even capable of adding assets and maps. And that's actually done by the art team. And to a large extent has been done by Zeronius Rex, even up to and including the Voth mobs.
Keep in mind that Geko is design, and while design sounds like art, design is more or less coming up with, taking assets and getting everything to fit together. It's designing how things work.
Yeah.
Not so much, I mean, it's not quite systems, but...
Code monkeys, right?
Not quite code monkeys.
No?
More like, spreadsheets.
Database tables or whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, Geko's the one that's coming up with, all of the specs for the ships to figure out if ship is balanced or not. Stuff like that. I am not 100% sure. I think, the people who actually build the missions would fall under him. I think those are the content, developers are, under the design team.
But, somebody like Taco who's on the art team.
That he's an environmental, so he actually builds the assets that get put into missions.
Yeah. He builds it and then he hands it over to Geko's guys.
The content designers are basically the Stowe's equivalent, or the Foundry, or dev team's equivalent of, us, of Foundry authors. So they take the assets, they build the missions, design the whole thing, design the flow, design how everything's going to work out. So they're doing that sort of thing.
But, really what it means is that I sort of have to apologize for a couple of tweets I've sent Geko's way, saying that they should focus on assets and not features, because that's really not what his team is responsible for.
Yeah. Yeah, and
his team is feature focused in this case. These are the things that they're adding. They're really not in charge of tagging assets.
Yeah, and it gets even more further complicated because, obviously someone like Taco isn't going to be doing costumes. He isn't going to be doing ships.
No, he does maps.
Yeah, he definitely does assets.
Pieces of maps.
I think he would do maps. Then again, that might be a content developer.
Well, and he actually did tag once upon a time some things for the Foundry from his Utopia Planitia map.
Okay.
Cause he was the one who, and he kind of went through this whole process of, first he put it in and there were some things broken on it because he didn't realize that opening and closing doors doesn't work when it's baked into a map when it's just plopped right in the Foundry. And so he had to go back in and make sure that they were locked open.
I kind of get the feeling that in many ways we kind of suffer from the fact that a lot of the people who really knew how the Foundry worked kind of went with the Foundry team when they went over to Neverwinter to start developing there.
Oh, I expect so.
So, I mean, when Geko talks, it's pretty clear he's overseeing things, but at the same time, his understanding of it is somewhat limited.
Because he hasn't really done much with it before now.
Yeah. I think the only reason...
At least that's our interpretation.
So I think about the most knowledgeable people we have on the Foundry right now on the Stowe team are Zeronius Rex and Cryptic Frost.
Which we hope, beyond hope, that they listen to what Cryptic Frost is passing on for us.
Yeah. And, it's been said in the past that Zero is kind of the Foundry advocate. And, from what Geko has been saying, it sounds like she's still doing assets, even though she doesn't, hasn't posted in a while.
Hasn't posted since she, handed off the responsibility for patch notes.
That's true. And it may be a case that her new role as a producer is just, it requires so much of her time that, she
of course,
can't be on the forums as much.
From what I understand of the size of their overall team, I think there's probably about 20 or 30 people there who do not post on the forums at all.
I think it's more than that. I mean,
More than that?
I'd say that there are probably less than 10.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And what are they up to, like 50 now?
I think they're up to like 50 now.
Wow.
And
so that's a lot of devs who do not post.
Yeah, and I mean,
I don't blame them.
They're still adding. I mean, we got our third ship artist not too long ago.
That's right, and there's always some job openings.
Yeah.
I think they started right after the sale at about 10 or 11.
I don't know if it was quite that far down, but it was definitely
way down.
Yeah, from what I remember, it was.
They had very few.
Yeah, matter of fact, I think it was. It might have been Geko or Mark Valentine who told us on primetime. Matter of fact, I think it was Mark.
I remember that they said that they had they had been under a hiring freeze, so basically whenever somebody left, they didn't get replaced. Mm-hmm. But that's all past.
Yeah. That's all in the past. I mean, one of the things looking to the future that Geko said on this was the Stoked interview.
Yeah.
He mentioned that he would like, that if the community put together a list of assets that we'd like a short list, he would pass it on for us. So, Greendragoon, you want to talk about that?
So yes, I kind of started a thread to basically ask, how do we determine what would go onto this incredibly short list? And of course, this immediately kind of spawned into everyone making their own lists, which unfortunately I didn't find very helpful because I was hoping kind of that people would kind of come to the conclusion that, hey, we need to come to a consensus on this. And thankfully they did actually, after I stopped prodding them for a while, they actually kind of came to it on their own. And so it was actually a new author I didn't recognize. Sorry, let me find it here. Okay, it was Primar13, who actually kind of took this a step further and compiled all of the suggestions that everybody had made in the thread so far and put it into a list. And at that point I said, well, we kind of need to narrow it down, so why don't we put it to a vote? And so he was actually took the list and converted it into a poll for Google Docs and put all of the things on there and basically set it at select 25 out of these 100 or so assets that have been suggested. And so I really like this. I mean, I think this is a very good way to kind of whittle it down to what is our like most widely requested assets right now. And it's one of the things hope people will think about is that it shouldn't be thought of as the last assets we'll ever get, but only what we need the most. Because I kind of think of it like Foundry triage. What do we really need right now to get by? But I mean, yeah, that's about where it is as of today. And so I'm hoping everybody will hop on to the Foundry forums and cast your vote, and so we can get a nice wide sample.
We'll make sure that if voting is still going on by the time this podcast is out, I'll make sure to put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely one of those things I'd love to get as many people. I mean, because the Foundry is kind of all of ours, so no one person should be deciding what makes the short list. I don't know, what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, is it going to be both things? Is it going to be both features and art assets?
Well,
at this point, it is just art assets.
Yeah, on this particular list, and of course he said he's going to pass it on. We have no really guarantee that any of this is going to make it in, obviously.
Yeah.
We know for sure that he's working on features already himself. Yeah. Him and his team are porting features over from Neverwinter.
Right.
We know of a couple one that's already in once this is back up, and one that is going to be in as soon as they iron out the bugs. And then he said something like a dozen or so other features they're planning to work on.
Yeah, over the next 6 months, right?
Yeah. Either before, during, or immediately after season 9. So anytime.
Well, that's good. It's definitely something to look forward to.
Yeah. So I mean, we know they're working on features, and he offered to pass along a short list to the art team to see if they would do that.
Well, to be honest, I'd love to see a green screen in there. Just a wall and a floor. That's all I really need.
Which, of course, is part of the problem, is that everybody asked that question is going to have something different to add.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I could come up with a lot of things, but that one's been asked for a long time.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping that even if we can present Geko with a weighted list, so it still has 100 things on it, but like 53% of people want this thing, then it kind of gives Geko something you can hand off the team and say, hey, this is how the Foundry community feels about this.
Right.
And
a green screen's not going to be top of that list.
Yeah. No, but I mean, at the very least it gives them something to work on. I mean, it doesn't all have to come in once.
And it gives them a better idea of the priorities of the community than our 100-some-odd page asset request thread that's been up there for years.
I don't think anyone has ever even read all of it.
Oh, yeah, probably not.
I think we could every single one of us, benefit from some small item assets.
There's definitely a lot of little things that we'd love to have.
And even
course,
I will
every time you make a mission, you figure out some new little asset that you're like, oh, I need that, and I don't have it for this specific mission.
Yeah, and I will say there are things on this list that I wish were on that aren't, and I know that everyone else that looks at this list will wish for things on it that aren't. And
I say that said, it is a good list. I like the stuff that is on it.
It's got a lot of variety to it, even if it doesn't have everything. But the point is to
prioritize from that list. And
I think
it's a good place
to get them moving on something. Give them something to chew on that isn't a massive
something concrete
block.
It is a good
concrete
list to
and
start
doable
with too.
Yes.
We hope doable anyway.
You know, at this point, I'd like to see anything just a little new and different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been at these same maps and probably have customized them to to the nth degree.
Mm-hmm.
Now we play the game and let's recognize the map. What was the base map?
I make a specialty out of making maps unrecognizable.
He does. It's very true. All right, let's move on. We've already sort of gone over what we've been working on, which is not much of anything. Given the downtime, I will say though that I've been casting about a bit, deciding what to do now that Purity is done. Paul, you might have been doing the same thing. And I kind of decided that I would finally get my 5-part Descent series that I made back when the Foundry was brand new. Finally get that put back up and remastered. So once it's up, I'm going to be working on that. It's been down for far too long.
Actually, I was trying to address some of the things that I felt weren't explained completely. So I've actually been working on a case spin-off. But I can't do anything because I write everything in the Foundry. I can't write it out and then put it in later. I just can't work that way.
Oh, wow.
I wish I could.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same too. So much of how I decide how things flow is based on what maps I'm using. So, I mean, I will craft my stories around my assets.
I've done things both ways. I can't say that one is necessarily better than the others.
Yeah, I would say I just generally write some things outside of the Foundry before I get it going, before I actually get the project underway, kind of thing.
There's been a couple of times where I've had it so much in my head already that it was naturally very easy to just type it in the Foundry. Yeah. Now, if you go and play that mission, it probably has a lot more spelling errors than the other ones.
Yeah, I will say I did plan out the plots of parts 2 and 3 before I released part 1, but I didn't write out. I mean, dialogue has been definitely write it as I go and then go back and refine it.
But I'm hoping to enlist some playtesters when I get started working on these to help with that dialogue error catching as well. So hopefully I'll be coming back to you guys and say, hey, play my mission.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious to ask, will Major Recall's plot ever come to fruition?
I hope so. I mean, as far as I know, the Foundry isn't going anywhere, so we all got hopefully years left to build.
Yeah, I mean, despite what some people think, I think the game is stronger than ever.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
I have to believe it's making money. I mean, considering the amount of people that you see in lockbox ships.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just because you don't like the lockboxes doesn't mean that there isn't somebody dumping far too much money into it.
I know they got a few dollars from me for keys recently.
Me too.
Just a few. I try not to go overboard.
We just got some money from me for Scimitar.
I get 2 Voth ships out of those boxes within a week.
I hate you so much. so much.
The only one I ever wanted was the bug ship, too. Which kills me. And I don't have that.
I've got that.
I got the one lockbox ship I've always wanted.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I've always wanted the Cardassian ship, but never got me.
The Gala.
They're expensive now, too.
Yeah, I imagine. Yeah.
They never used to be.
Well, let's move it on. I've got a mission review. I actually reviewed a mission the day before the downtime started. Unfortunately, that's a long time ago, so I really can't say much on the plot because I don't remember it. But I do have some notes here. It's called Uprising II, The Tempest by Man in Black, and I reviewed Uprising 1 off the grid not too long ago. And he's got a series. This is the second one, and I think there's going to be more. I don't think the other ones are up yet, though. So there were a couple of things that he used for a briefing room. I remember basically now. It was about space pirates, and you're going after a space pirate. You're introduced to that space pirate in the first one, and now you're essentially taking the fight to him. And part of it involves escorting the president of the Federation, who is somebody that he made up, not President Okeg from Stowe. But, I kind of said, okay, this is your mission. I'll kind of go along with that if you want to make up a president. Maybe not everybody knows who the president of the Federation is supposed to be in the Stowe timeline, or, it might have been a conscious decision. But, I'll kind of go with whatever the established rules of each Foundry mission is going to be, what the author wants me to accept. So, a couple of things I advised him to do is, he falls into that trap of using the generic interiors, which are huge and cavernous, and it's very difficult to make them feel not huge and cavernous. So you go into this map, and he set it up where there's some pool tables, there's sort of a lounge area, there's a mess hall area, and then there's a briefing room area. The only thing, though, is that these are not separated by walls, and I would definitely separate it by walls, especially because you're supposed to be having a top secret level briefing in the briefing area of this big room, and, just anybody could walk along and hear you. So some walls in there would be good. There were some areas I felt could use some more dialogue options, just to express some different opinions. There's a point where you're told that the Federation has been keeping a secret, and it's actually been a damaging secret. And I felt like, there should be an option to, your character expresses outrage that this was done. And I think there should be an option to say, I understand why this was done. And I condone it even though it turned out bad. I noticed some texture overlap, in some of the space backdrops. That's something that's hard to predict because you're putting textures together that weren't built to go together. So you just kind of have to, when you're playing your missions and you're building a space map, make sure you rotate the camera around, look around, and make sure that there's none of that flickering texture overlap.
Well, this is a known bug, though. This happens even in cryptic maps.
It does. And in fact, a lot of cryptic maps. I was just playing, one of the Breen missions last night, out in the cold, I think it is, and that has some really nasty texture overlap on it.
Yeah, for some reason the Z order, or the Z offset isn't working properly on the backdrops, so I don't know if there's a lot you can do about it.
Well, it only happens in a few places in the Foundry that I've noticed. And I can't say specifically which ones because I haven't gone through and looked specifically at which ones caused this.
And I notice it in space. Sometimes in nebulas.
Yeah, this one I'm talking about is the space spectrums. One thing I liked in the mission that I really like when authors do this is having you send an away team rather than lead an away team. Because obviously that's something we saw Captain Picard do a lot. I like when I send an away team thing and then I listen to their reports and give them directions, give them things to do. This was something that he did in this mission. There was an NPC that disappeared while I was talking to him. I think it was supposed to disappear after I was done talking to him, and I think it's just a case of he set it to disappear like while the objective was in progress instead of complete or something like that. So time to go through and look for that. This was the main pirate. But it was very well done overall. I would highly recommend this series to everybody, and it's really got some good and fun stuff in it. And it has something we were talking about on Foundry Files the other day. It has a Greendragoon style cliffhanger.
I'm just gonna get
this is actually a
specific
designation now that we have in the Foundry. So obviously because the Foundry is down, we haven't had a chance to review many other missions lately, but we decided we were going to do something a little bit different and talk about the new Federation tutorial that was released with Season 8. Now, Paul, have you played this?
I played some of it when it first was available, and I got stuck fighting Klingons on the Federation ship. I haven't been back in yet.
Okay. Well, we'll try not to spoil too much past that. But, I don't know. Greendragoon, you were the one who was wanting to talk about this. What are your thoughts?
I'm sorry, I missed it.
I said you were the one who kind of wanted to talk about this. What were your thoughts?
Oh, on the Federation tutorial?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it changes everything, actually. If you go back to the original tutorial, I mean, there are certain aspects that are similar between the original and the new one. Most notably the Borg invasion of the Vega colony. However, in the original one, you're kind of left with the feeling that they have managed to stop the Borg threat, and that the threat is subsiding. Because, I mean, you're taking out these damaged Borg cubes, which, I mean, spoilers, if you played through the original Khitomer Accord, know that your future self damaged. But in the new one, it changes things, and basically all you can do is try to save a few people and get out of there. So, and
there is no longer that link to Khitomer Accord, right?
Yeah, I mean, as far as we could tell, there's no link to Khitomer Accord.
Which, is Khitomer Accord now not available anymore?
It's still available, but it's been chopped up and a lot of the story is missing.
Oh, okay.
So, like, there were a lot of aspects of Khitomer Accord that didn't make the cut. But yeah, I mean, the big thing, and again, more spoilers, is that at the end of the tutorial, Vega is in complete control by the Borg. And the bets that Starfleet is hoping to do is to bottle them up. So, for me, this kind of is a paradigm shift, because there is no way that the Borg could be that close to Earth and Starfleet would not be completely freaking out. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the end of Voyager, and they detect a transwarp conduit like a couple of light years from Earth, and they're like, we gotta get everything we can at this thing. Like, rally all ships as fast as you can. And while I realize Voyager kind of made the Borg seems like pansies sometimes, still, I mean, they're a very serious threat. I mean, it's like one of those things, like, how do you worry about the Klingon war when there are freaking Borg on your doorstep?
It's definitely a thread that's left hanging.
Yeah, so...
And is not picked up currently in any of the other missions.
So yeah, my first thought after playing this was like, but how can you do that? You can't just leave it like that. So then I got to thinking about it, and then I realized this is a huge, huge opportunity. And it just kind of, in my mind, just kind of started working on the problem, and it mushroomed from there. And by the end of I was thinking of an entire revamp of the entire, like, the Borg adventure zone, reputation, and all that. And so, here is my radical idea. The Borg do not invade Gamma Rhinus. That's not where they are. I mean, it made little sense for the Borg to be in Gamma Rhinus anyways. It's on the far side of the Klingon Empire. It's in the wrong direction. It's one of those things like, why Gamma Rhinus? It's the edge of nowhere. And it's an edge of nowhere in the wrong direction. So here's what I'm thinking. The Borg stuff, the SDFs, the Borg missions, and most importantly, the Defera ground invasion do not occur at any of those locations. The entire sector block gets remade to take up that northwest quadrant from Earth, which is where Vega is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be in Sirius sector block. And that whole section becomes its own new sector block, which has been cordoned off by Starfleet. They are desperately trying to keep this contained. So, and in fact, I thought it'd be fun if you try to fly up to this sector block, if you get stopped by a starship and say, hey, you can't go any further. This sector block is quarantined. So inside this new sector block, I mean, obviously all of the missions that currently occur in Gamma Uranus would have to be moved. But at the same time, that's not really a problem because none of the stuff that happens in Gamma Uranus is specific to anything in Gamma Uranus. One recognizable location in Gamma Uranus is the Nutara Nebula, which doesn't get used. So I'm thinking the whole sector block is going to come over there. You could have some fun because I think Tellar is just barely in that sector block, so you could put that in there as kind of a plot if you wanted to exploit it. But at the same time, I think it could be shifted out if needed to. But the key to this whole thing would be to take what is currently the Defera invasion zone, which is its own kind of weird little side plot that never went anywhere, and take that and make that the Vega colony. So instead of trying to push back the Borg on Defera, you're trying to push back the Borg on the Vega colony and take it back. And then once I've realized that becomes the perfect center stone for a revamp of the whole Borg reputation system. Because instead of becoming this weird, isolated thing, which doesn't make any sense, because, I mean, let's face it, the Defera never really went anywhere. They were pretty quickly usurped by the Romulan Republic as the new kid on the block. So it suddenly kind of takes on a whole new level when you're basically trying to prevent the Borg from advancing any closer to Earth.
Well, I like it.
Did I talk enough?
No, I think that's an interesting idea.
The Fed tutorial took you there. I'm like, wow.
Oh, I mean, and then it got worse because in rerunning the featured episodes, I played through the 2800. And, of course, the beginning of the 2800 is this meeting between all of the powers to try and deal with the Borg threat. And in the context of that mission, they're talking about Defera, but with a little bit of tweaking, you could change it to be talking about the Vega colony, in which case the whole dynamic changes because suddenly becomes
So I think the issue with your idea, though, is it's not just tweaking a little bit of the STFs. It's tweaking everything, and there's no way. Yeah, that's the only issue that I have with it. I mean, there's some good ideas there, but it really is just tweaking everything. I mean, I played the Federation tutorial, and I certainly didn't get drawn into feeling like the entire story had to change. That's for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, it seems to me like an opportunity to draw together all of the aspects of the Borg that are right now not particularly well connected.
See, I thought it did a better job of bringing the Borg into focus for me. Actually, the tutorial did.
But I think my argument is that it becomes so focused that it becomes very hard to disengage at the end of the tutorial.
Not really, because you start the tutorial, the part that Paul's played up to anyway, is that whole bit with the Klingons invading your ship while you're out there as a cadet on a cadet cruise. I mean, that's really what I think they're wanting you to connect with, is that whole, you're out on your cadet cruise with a bunch of other cadets, and all of a sudden a Klingon warship attacks, and you've got to fight for control. That leads to, where they've rewritten a bunch of things to do with, with Vega and the Borg and everything else. But really, I think what they're wanting you to connect with in that tutorial is being the fresh-faced cadet out of the academy who is suddenly, forced into this position of being in command of a starship, and they actually make it make sense, which is awesome.
Yes, and that's one of the things I loved about this.
Just by including the one line from someone that the starship you're getting onto is a many years old, clunker of a thing, not, anything compared to the new whatever line that she says in the thing. So, yeah. To me, it didn't, I don't know, it didn't open up and make me feel like the whole story had to change. It's okay to me that after this, this is the moment when the Borg come back in this tutorial. This is
but
the same thing we heard. And
we never again gets addressed that the Borg are in control of, basically have a foothold only mere light years away from Earth.
Yeah.
So
as it is now, and maybe they're not done.
They leave it as a cliffhanger, though. I think there is that.
Maybe they're not done revamping things.
Yeah.
That early game.
But I mean, it's one of those things when, and I apologize, Paul, if I'm ruining anything.
Oh no, don't even worry about it.
Okay. When you get down to Vega, I mean, you literally see one of those assimilation
units
that have landed, and it looks exactly like
really
Defera.
And you saw those in space too. I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, I would almost say it's one of those things. Yes, it would require tweaks everywhere, but it would be only tweaks everywhere instead of completely redoing everything. Anyway, I mean that's kind of just what I pulled from it. Because I mean, the 2800. I mean, it suddenly changes from the Borg are around. We need to rally together to the Federation saying, the Borg are on our doorstep. We need your help. And of course, I mean, for anyone who
the thing is only a red anyway, but
yeah, that's what bugged me about it was. I mean, it's kind of actually an important thing. That's anyway.
I don't feel like the Vega colony is something that they're just leaving alone. I feel like that's the action that's going on the other side of things, because you're a cadet, really literally you're a cadet at the end of the tutorial. So you don't know what the captains of the fleet and the big starships are doing. Until you get to the point that, hey, the Borg have invaded this colony and that, and you're starting to do STFs at endgame, and somehow it makes sense.
Maybe your thought is that the assignment to get rid of the Borg out of Vega colony was given to somebody else.
Yeah. You're a cadet. You don't deal with the Borg. Your first officer even mentions that a bunch of times. You're like, we're cadets, sir. What the hell? What is this? This is crazy.
So I'm going to make one last argument, and that is if the story around the upper level Borg content was changed to center around the Vega colony, it would take it being from an abstract, the Borg are bad, let's kill them, to a very much more personal story for the player. Because it's this defining point that in the tutorial you watch the assimilation of a colony. And it's really a horrific thing if you think about it. To watch this colony be assimilated and you just being powerless to stop it. And then to come back as an admiral and really be able to do something about it. Anyway, I mean, you're someone who's always arguing for a more story-driven purpose behind the reputation system.
No, this is very true. The thing is, the tutorial totally worked for me, and in all, it didn't make me feel like it didn't weaken the rest of the Borg story for me at all.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's saying that it weakens it, but I think he's saying it feels like he has unfinished business.
I think it's an opportunity.
Well, I guess when I played it, I tried to look at it as and knowing that you wanted to talk about reviewing it almost like it was a Foundry mission, we had talked about maybe doing that with Sphere of Influence too, which would have scored lower than the current tutorial for the Federation, by the way, if it had been a Foundry mission. And in my case, once again, for me, it all came down to the story, like you're saying. And for the tutorial itself, it becomes really personal from no matter what race you're playing, the moments that it presents very early on that get you to be sitting in that captain's chair are really freaking intense. And I don't care if you're playing an emotionless Vulcan, you're still going to, as a player, have a response to the tutorial because it does such a good job with the characters that it chooses to use, I think. Even as our friend Casmodian likes to say, even that annoying sounding Saurian or Cation or whatever one he doesn't like. I
totally agree with you. I mean, I definitely like the progression that the tutorial has, especially, I remember there were tons of complaints, and I agreed with them that the original tutorial your ascension to captain was too convenient. It was all done off screen. In fact, I think I made a big argument about how this needed to happen on screen, and now it does. So I think the new tutorial is like totally awesome. I don't think it should end there.
I feel like
you think that the story
needs a sequel
up again?
More or less.
I think for me the biggest issue that the tutorial has right now is what immediately follows it. Stranded in Space was redone fairly but it's
been a while now, but yes, it was.
Yeah. But
it was certainly redone.
Real old. Like the content that follows the tutorial now, the tutorial is, right on par with the best of the best that they're doing now. And it is immediately followed by content that's 3 years old and
stuff that uses old maps and things like that.
And so I'm not even saying that
it really makes what follows it look dated.
I'm not even saying that the follow-up to what happens there needs to
you're thinking about Endgame, like with STF stuff. I totally see that. But they gutted, honestly, I would love to see them fix STFs somehow. But in my mind, fixing them only means giving me a half a reason. Some storyline missions that involve, the Admiral from Deep Space Nine, who is the leader of Omega Force, Admiral, what is it, Devak? Is that his name? I don't remember. Yeah, give me something there, because as it is, all that happens is I reach a certain level and there's a bunch of new queuable events that if I choose to, I can read the little bit of story that they present at the beginning, which I did the very first time and a couple of times since. But you're right, they don't do anything to continue the story. So they used to in their original form.
It used to be that it looped back on itself with Khitomer
Accords. I think Dragoon is sort of arguing for a return to that.
Yeah, and I think there is an opportunity for a story progression throughout the board content that begins in the tutorial, is touched on in 2800, because for all we know, the Omega Force is what came out of that meeting in 2800. That could have been how Omega Force was formed.
It existed before that.
Yeah,
though.
well, because now that they've adjusted the timeline a little bit, where
where
2800 falls before you go to Gamma Orionis.
True.
Which is, of course, makes it even weirder.
Has screwed it all up for those of us who have just been playing this content as it's been released.
Right.
But for somebody now who's going through this, it makes a little bit more sense.
Oh, there's another point is, right now, at the beginning of the 2800, they are complaining about the invasion of Defera, despite the fact that the Green Arc doesn't occur until much later, which takes place before the invasion of Defera.
Yep.
So
obviously, consistency, cryptic. Take note.
So, like I said, I think it's just, again, another opportunity, because obviously the Vega colony has already been invaded in a very similar fashion to Defera. and would be a very poignant thing that even the player is familiar with.
Could even make it a mid-level thing instead of an endgame thing.
Yeah, and plus we get to we can cut Ambassador Sura out of the 2800, and nobody will miss him.
I would miss him.
Really?
I actually like them. I like the Deferi. I know I'm weird, but I think they're pretty cool race.
They're sort of the one prominent race that Cryptic invented themselves.
Yeah, but then
there's no really anybody else.
The new child and the Defera were never heard from again.
I still go there a lot.
I like their map a great deal. I think the race is interesting, but
yeah, but I mean, they still have their own arc with the brain.
Yeah,
which I still think are quite good missions. I still enjoy playing them.
Same.
Yeah, I'm playing through
especially when you get low-buy from it.
So yes, the combination of a new tutorial plus a free low-buy made me come up with this elaborate plot.
So if we were thinking of it as a Foundry mission, part of what we would look at is map design. What do you guys think of the map design in the new tutorial?
Map design is very good. Lots of new stuff. Finally get to see the upper level of Starfleet Academy. I can't tell you how glad I was to see that.
I've been there before. It's changed. Back when they first put Starfleet Academy in the game, there was absolutely nothing to do on that map. So there was a glitch where you could get outside the fence, where you can look out on the bay. You essentially backed up to it, logged out, logged back in, you were on the other side of the fence. Then you could go and you could jump up the trees and get on the tops of the buildings. And you got up there, and of course there was nothing up there at the time.
Yeah.
Just, flat surface. I've even got some screenshots still of me and my old fleet up there, just, screwing around. And, that's where, if anybody ever jokes to you about rocket boot, that's where it comes from.
Okay.
Because people would ask, how do I get up there? People say, oh yeah, you gotta go get the rocket boots. They're being sold by the Cardassian. Gullible.
I wonder how many people actually went looking for him.
Oh yeah, I imagine a lot.
Yeah, plenty.
So anyway, they have redone that entire thing, into a really cool looking shuttle pad. I think very, very reminiscent to me of the scene in, Star Trek 2009 where all the cadets are getting their ship assignments.
Yeah, and I definitely like the touches with the kind of building or establishing who your fellow cadets are, and some of them end up as your initial bridge crew. I thought it was a little strange. It's like so and so wanted to talk to you. Okay, you talk to him. It's like, oh hey, how you doing? It's like, also by the way, so and so wanted to talk to you.
On a graduation day?
Yeah, do this 3 or 4 times in a row.
3 or 4 times in a row was a little bit much, but on a graduation day, it's really not that weird for people to be saying, hey, do you know that he wanted to talk to you? No, I didn't. I have to go over there now.
Yeah, but, they were using the same trick several times in a row, and that was the...
Yeah, there are other tricks they could have used.
It was very linear at that point in the mission. But, I don't know, you don't want to go too complicated. It is a tutorial. Yeah. So we have to sort of judge it as that.
And there's a certain amount of, you gotta handhold them because, a
little bit.
They've been in the game for all of 5 minutes, if that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
We of course come into this as players with years of experience. Mm-hmm. You have to sort of put yourself in the shoes of someone who isn't.
I will admit that when I first, went through it, I was a little bit skeptical of the kind of dual nature of the tutorial that it has now.
Dual nature.
Because you have the part with the Klingons, and then you've got the part with the Borg.
Yeah.
And there's not really any connection between the two. Nothing that happens with the Klingons relates to what happens later with the Borg. And so,
that is very true.
It's essentially like 2 missions.
So yeah, I would have liked to have
first cruise and then the thing with
what happens on the way back.
Coincidence.
But yeah, I would have liked to, hindsight being 20/20 and all that good stuff. I would have liked to have seen something along the lines of the start of the Borg arc connecting to the tail end. So maybe while you're dealing with this Klingon captain at the end, the Borg show up, and that kind of leads into the rest. So there's a progression there.
I'm not sure if that would be even more strange.
Yeah.
Because it's already a little slightly strange that this Klingon, because I mean it's a trap, but it's still a little convenient that it would happen right next to you.
Yeah, of course.
And
middle of Federation space. I assume you're in the middle of Federation space.
yeah, I think it was it Matt Miller that got interviewed or said at some point, or explained at some point, kind of their design goals and going for this was that they wanted to establish the Klingon Federation War, and this was kind of
because it is a heavy part of the
early game,
first 15 or so levels.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm kind of willing to forgive that. It bugs me less now than it did the first time.
Obviously, you do want to get people into combat soon because they have to learn how.
Yeah. And it's probably a better step up than throwing you straight into the board.
See, what I would love to see would be at the end of it somewhere, they talk about, I'd love to see them at the end say something about what's coming up with the Borg so that it just becomes a tease at the end of this mission that tells you all about the Klingon War. The Vega stuff doesn't need to be quite as big in the tutorial, I guess. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
because
you almost have to listen, or not listen, but look at the Vega section of the tutorial as a second mission.
Yeah, and in fact, I think it's
rather
actually,
than almost part of the tutorial.
I think it qualifies as like 3 or 4 separate missions if you
as far
kind
as
of watch
the mechanics of it. Yeah,
because I mean, they're all daisy chained, but yeah, there's actually 3 or 4 cryptic missions that make up the tutorial.
Yeah.
Which brings me the other side. If you did have move the Borg stuff to a new sector block where Vega is supposed to be, you could make that its own independent sector block or just for the tutorial. It's like a pre-assimilated version that you run around.
Later it's post-assimilated.
Yeah, then later you're dealing with the Borg as
they had that way back. This is like 10 years ago. In the first Guild Wars, they had that. Your tutorial area was this nice green lush countryside, and then it was instanced off from the rest of the game. Nobody else could go there except starting characters up to about level 5 or something like that. Maybe even 10. No, it was more like 5. And then once you went through the tutorial storyline, you went out on a mission, and this great cataclysm happened, and then once you're done with that mission, now it's a little while later, it's post-cataclysm, the area around you is blasted all to hell, and it's like a wasteland, and now you've joined the rest of the game population.
Yeah.
It's like that forever, you can't go back.
Lord of the Rings Online actually does stuff like that, where you'll have the starter area, and then once you join the live, it's after everything that's happened and things have changed.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know, I think it's a good way to kind of connect the player with what's going on.
Yeah. Looking at it the way that I look at Foundry missions, I'll say they did an amazing job with characters.
Yes.
And making me actually care about them. Especially Eliza, I think that's her name, right? The first officer.
Flores.
Flores, well, yeah. They did a better job here, I felt like, than they did in the Romulan tutorial, actually. Where I ended up actually, what's that?
You mean than they did with Tovan?
Than they did with, I think with all of them. I think that Eliza Flores is a better first officer than Tovan Kev. And I don't dislike Tovan either. I just think they made her more likable than they made him. But I think in general they give you a better connection to all of the characters. They make you feel like these people are cadets that you've just been 4 years a cadet with. And that you're about to go on your first cruise, all of you are graduating together, and they made those characters feel that kind of, they're important to your captain if you play through that whole tutorial in a way that they weren't for me in the wrong tutorial.
A lot of people were making fun of the warp 5.nothing line, and I totally love that line. I mean, that's such a very specific line to her. That is her personality. I mean, obviously the average Joe Schmo Starfleet officer is not going to phrase it that way, but at the same token, she's not meant to be like some random crewman. She's meant to be a specific character with her specific mannerisms. There was a choice like later in the mission, once you've kind of like been in command a little while and you've kind of gone through all of these things, one of the captains of the other ships asked you, is your crew up to this? I mean, basically, you're a bunch of cadets. I mean, are you handling the stress? And you have an option to say, sure we are, well, I'll go ask. And I chose the sure we are because I mean, heck, I'm the captain. I'm gonna project confidence. And, she kind of gives off this line of, yeah, I think we are. And it's just great because I mean, it kind of hints at some of the, just the fact that, you are just a bunch of cadets kind of thrown into this, very, very much out of your league situation.
It reminded me of the films of like my favorite moments from Star Trek. That they had to have been going for Wrath of Khan vibes partially there. And they have to have been, they have to have picked up on trying, I felt like Wrath of Khan vibes, 2009 vibes, you know, they had this whole, they really connected with the idea of being a young Starfleet officer in some really interesting ways, so.
Yeah, and they did a very good job. I mean, much better than.
Interestingly enough, timeline-wise, this really shows us a little bit of what they might be thinking when, in interviews, you know, Captain Geko says things about advancing the timeline. We have the Romulan tutorial that at the very beginning it says 6 months before the attack on the Vega colony. That's why they had to leave the attack on the Vega colony in the tutorial, because the Federation tutorial now is decidedly 6 months after
2 weeks.
What had?
It was 2 weeks before the Vega.
Oh, it was 2 weeks?
Yeah.
So, well, it's decidedly a 2 week period.
Yeah.
that happens. And then they can somehow explain away enough time to have built New Romulus, which I've always
I would have liked
a
little bit better progression because I mean, at a certain point you get access. There's no fanfare about it being.
I would have liked to have at least like helped with the construction. Of it.
Yeah. Which I mean, I guess which is still in progress once you get to max level and start doing the Romulan reputation system. But
I still want to see what's on the other side of those walls.
Isn't that the Romulus command?
And down in the, but it looks bigger than that.
Okay.
It looks like it's supposed to be a city.
I really want to make it down to those Riemann places down below. That's my big.
Two of our boys been down there and posted screenshots.
Him and his dev magic.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it's all like low poly, imposter geometry.
Probably is. Yeah. I imagine if it's not being used for anything, it probably is.
Yeah, so they would have to actually fully model out that in any part of the city they let you in.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, I'm not entirely sure where obviously, I think we're building towards the Delta Quadrant, and I don't know if that really offers any opportunity to expand New Romulus.
Yeah. I think in the immediate future we're building toward the Delta Quadrant, but I think we have a much longer future ahead of us in this game than all the doomsayers out there like to predict.
Yeah.
Right? As you've said many times, this game feels like a really healthy game right now. They'll get to it. If you want it, it's probably on their whiteboard somewhere. You know,
the funny thing about it is that
marking stuff off whiteboard, yeah.
I hate to admit it, but the reason that it's gotten to the state where it is because they have been focusing on the core needs of the game.
Yeah.
And unfortunately less on things like the Foundry.
Well, I'm glad they focused on the core needs of the game, because it's what has us having more players and being a healthier game than we were before.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I mean, I think I've said it before, but I think it's a good sign of the health of the game. With that, they can now devote time to these secondary systems.
In any way, yeah.
Well, why don't we move it along to our tech topic for the evening?
Yay! So, this is something that was suggested, wasn't it? Or
yeah, it kind of came up in conversation, I think, on the forum thread for our last episode, as I recall.
Asking about tips and tricks on building more 3D maps, or really utilizing the vertical space in a map.
Specifically space maps.
Yeah. In fact, he was quoting Wrath of Khan about two-dimensional thinking in space. And as Foundry authors, we do kind of do that. We'll build all of our maps on a plane and not really consider building like in the vertical. Because I mean, even if the main action is only occurring on a plane, there are still lots of things you can do like above and below to really accentuate a map and really kind of make it different. So,
my philosophy tends to be sort of have your objectives on one flat plane, but so that they're easy to find, but vary the heights of your objects so that they look more natural.
Yeah.
There's a lot of space to take advantage of.
Mm-hmm. But even doing that is sort of, I don't know, it's a little bit of a not utilizing everything at your advantage. Because you can make very interesting maps in 3 dimensions in space, as Paul can tell us.
Yeah, you do so at your peril in a way, though. I mean, it's great to do, don't get me wrong, but having too many objectives too far in either direction really confuses people. But, a couple of kilometers here or there will still give you that 3-dimensional feeling, but doesn't throw you off so much. But I think players have a tendency to like things on the zero plane. Or at least, a level plane, no matter where you set it at. But I agree that your object should all be all over the place. I mean, if you have that,
nature is random.
Right. I mean, even if you're laying down an asteroid field or something, I usually do multiple fields and put them maybe 0.5 kilometers apart up and down so that they at least have some depth, because everything laying flat out like that.
I have seen very complex maps with lots of objects on them, all done completely on one plane. No y-axis or z-axis, whatever you want to call it. No height variation. And it doesn't look very good.
No.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's the natural state for the editor because the editor doesn't display any vertical space. So it's kind of an abstract concept that authors have to get used to.
Well, at least we're fortunate enough to be able to build a space map from scratch.
Yeah.
That's true. But if you look at a lot of the cryptic maps, they do a lot with vertical space. A lot of our built-in space maps. But, Paul, could you tell us about, there's a space map of yours that I'm thinking of, and I told you this before the show, the one where you fly right next to a freighter.
Yeah.
That you have
I know exactly what you're referring to.
Now I recall that made some fairly good use of vertical space, am I right?
Yeah, there was some variation. Yep.
Was there anything that you did to sort of make it easier for people to figure out where to go?
Yeah, they put in a lot of invisible walls, for one thing. And hopefully you didn't notice them. But, I made it so...
I don't think I did.
you can't completely stray so far that you're out of line, because it wasn't an easy thing to do. Let's face it, if you don't follow the freighter in a specific pattern, you don't hit the points because there are triggers all along that path. And, you know as well as I do, if you don't make those markers large enough, you're all done there. They're not going to trigger, and you're going to have problems. But as long as I place beacons a lot, so that you can, you have something to aim for if you're not using invisible objects. Because at least those you can scan for. But I would say not to clutter up a path with them, because you see 5 of those blinking beacons at once, you don't know which one to head for. So as you
I say you want to spawn and despawn them.
Right, along the way, absolutely. Every time you hit the reach marker, you spawn one, despawn the one you've reached, and so on. But basically that's really the only thing you can do, is just make that next objective as visible as possible. If you're going to go, say, down 3 kilometers and then up 3, and then, it really has to be marked out well.
Yeah, one thing, I built a map on Tribble to test some Tribble Foundry stuff when Season 8 was first put up on there. And I kind of made it as a test bed for one that I wanted to make for a while in an actual Foundry mission. And what it is there's a space station, and you have to escort 3 convoys of freighters to the station. So, you go to the first set of coordinates, the convoy warps in, goes to the station. On the way, it's attacked. And I did pretty much exactly what you described. It's all built on reach markers. And I always say, I've said many, many times on this podcast, that I don't like space reach markers. And I still don't to some extent. But when you're tasked to follow a patrol, that's a great time to use space reach markers, because you know essentially where the player's going to be, because I think most players would probably follow pretty close.
Right.
So you can use reach markers then, because you know that they're going to hit them.
Yeah, and there's also things you can do to kind of give the player a visible indicator of where to go and still use reach markers. Mm-hmm. So that can be like
the beacons, and then there's a beacon asset that blinks and has a little diamond that shows up on the
right, the icon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should say the reason I don't usually like space reach markers is because you can run into a problem where if the player has gone too far up or too far down, they won't trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then it becomes very difficult for the player to actually get in the right spot. And
that's why it's good to center a reach marker around something. So, for instance, if they're going to a planet, then you put the reach marker around the planet. And so whenever they get into orbit, it triggers.
Yep, that's a good way to do it. The advantages to using interact with objects, as opposed to reach markers, is that you can scan for them. Press your V key and it gives you an indication of where to go. The downside of that is not everybody knows about that. So, it's sometimes good to put that in the mission in like OOC text or something.
Right. Remind
people of that. Because you don't really use it a lot in game, as far as, the game doesn't tell you to use it a lot. So I think some people never knew about it unless somebody would tell them, and some people forget about it.
Yeah. Just put it in green in a dialogue before that objective.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Anybody got anything else on that particular subject?
I think sometimes it's kind of fun to, even if you're not varying the actual objectives, to kind of just play around with or throw things outside of the normal player's perspective. For instance, having you like above or below a planet, or having like stuff happening, like visually have visual assets above and below. In fact, sometimes very wildly, to kind of give a really big sense of depth. So maybe you'll have one planet that's like -50 down, and another one that's -75 up.
Right.
So they don't feel like they're on a plane, even if they are.
Yeah, I've done a couple of maps where the planet is below you, and I think it's turned out pretty good. Except that for the way the planets are built, the textures don't look very good at the top of the planet.
That's true.
You're really meant to look at most planets from the side, as far as how.
Yeah, It's a problem with spheres in general in 3D.
No doubt. It's a texturing thing.
Yeah. Well, if you ever know anything about cartography and trying to put round objects onto a square surface, deformation happens.
So I think you mean square objects onto a round surface, right?
Both ways.
Oh. Well, I don't know much about texturing or modeling. I will tell you that. Just know when something doesn't look good. But I don't know. I think it did create a sort of a different character to the space map. I mean, it was another one where I don't have a lot of 3D movement as far as the player goes, but the map looks very 3D because the whole planet is below you and you're looking down on it. Another thing that I like to do is vary the heights of enemies a little bit so that they're not all on a flat plane either. Especially if you're going to have a big fleet battle. If you sort of place your fleets at random heights from each other, within the fleet and from each other, you can create some really interesting three-dimensional battles.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the same is true for patrolling as well. If you're going to use the patrol feature, you can set each one of those patrol points to whatever point on the y-axis you want.
Yeah.
I think I did that in one where you follow a shuttle, sort of like Voyager did in Timeless, where they follow the Delta Flyer. I have you follow a shuttle, and I varied the heights of it so you're kind of, you're going up a little bit and you go down a little bit, and sort of roller coaster.
Yeah, and you don't want to throw the player too far off, like have to make them make like giant vertical changes.
No, not giant
royal
ones.
pain.
Just a little bit to get them feeling like they're in space and not on an ocean.
Yeah. But that does mean you can. It's funny when this topic originally came up, and he quoted made the quote from Wrath of Khan about Khan thinking two-dimensionally. Immediately thought that would be such a great PvP map. Is having you in a nebula.
Mm-hmm. And actually that was, back when I created that PvP thread in the PvP forums and asked for input, that was something somebody suggested, was have a PvP map like the Wrath of Khan, where you're in the nebula, you got no shields, limited sensors, and, you just have that open plane to fight in. It would be very interesting.
That would be very interesting.
I don't know, Hippie, do you have anything to add as far as on three-dimensional space maps?
Use objectives instead of reach markers. That's the biggest thing. And make sure that people remember they can use their scan for button. Because
you mean interacts.
Interacts, yeah.
Reach markers are objectives.
That's what I mean, interacts. You use actual interacts rather than reach markers, because if people do get off plane, they can have a heck of a time finding where you want them to go.
Yeah.
So.
And of course there is a slight issue in the Foundry at the moment that some of the reach markers are not appearing where they should be on the minimap.
Yeah.
The marker is actually still where it is.
It's the arrow.
Yeah, the arrow, the indicator on the minimap is far away. Happened on my Purity mission at the moment. Hopefully that gets
this is a bug that has resurfaced in the past.
It's funny, I encountered it on Tribble when testing Season 8, but it was just in preview. When I actually published the map, it was fine. So I don't know what the deal is at the moment, but did report it to Cryptic Frost, said he would kick it up the ladder.
Yeah, he said if you're seeing it on holodeck, then something's going wrong. So he's moving it up to the guys upstairs or something.
He's doing whatever it is that he does.
Does anybody else notice that things have seemed a little bit more responsive when it comes to the Foundry? I mean, as far as
right before we shut down?
I mean, even since.
We what sort of responsiveness are you talking about?
Well, for instance, I think it took one small comment to say, "Hey, is the republishing going all right?" And the devs almost immediately jumped on and said, "Hey, yep, we found a problem with the republishing. We're making some changes to get things back on track, and like just being responsive and letting us know what's going on and stuff like that.
I don't know. I generally find Brandflakes to be fairly responsive as far as issues go when you ask him directly.
True, but
either in a thread that he's made or by Twitter. I mean, and he'll tell you if he doesn't know.
But yeah, it definitely feels like the Foundry isn't like an afterthought like it was with Legacy of Romulus, or if we even got it, even you could even call it an afterthought then. It just feels like that we have people like actually looking at these things. I don't know. Maybe it's just
I don't know. To me, it's felt more responsive ever since Cryptic Frost started posting.
True, but it sounds like people are listening to Cryptic Frost now.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, it might just be
it's really hard to say what actually goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, it may only be that they're being better at communicating it now, which is still awesome.
Yeah. And there's been a little bit more light on it lately.
Yeah.
You know, because of the proposed upgrades. You know, it's just a nice thing.
We do know from comments that Captain Geko has made that they are actively fighting exploits. So that's always good to hear. I mean, you hate that they have to do that, but it's good that they do.
I'd love to ask how much time actively fighting exploits has taken up and how much of that time could have been, used toward improving.
How much time have exploiters stolen from us?
Yeah.
Captain Geko has basically said according to him, a lot of time was wasted chasing exploits that was kind of implied could have been devoted to developing the Foundry. But again, that's rolling in the past.
Yep. Why don't we move on to our last topic for the evening? Hippiejohn wanted to talk a little bit about the storytelling methods that Cryptic's been doing as far as Season 8 goes.
And how we can use them too. One thing that I've noticed real prominently in the battle zone and a little bit less prominently in the two areas of space that you can go to is that Cryptic's done a really, I don't know whether I'm going to say good job yet, but they've done a really interesting thing in that they've hidden the story of the Voth and the battle zone and the Dyson sphere all over the place rather than just in the cutscenes and a lot of it is that kind of information that is potentially optional for the person who doesn't care and just wants to go in and shoot a bunch of dinosaurs and get their marks. That's fine. But there is also the opportunity to explore all of these hidden consoles and find all of these hidden boxes, and in space do all of these DOF missions that appear at various places in space if you go there. And these are the ways that you can find out real solid pieces of the story. So I wanted to talk about how to apply that to Foundry missions. You had mentioned Drogan had mentioned that when you played through Malise's mission, the idea of having the Klingon lore singer there, where you could, anytime you wanted to, go to him for the information that you essentially needed to get.
He was essentially an option on almost every map.
Yeah.
That you could talk to this guy, and he had all the information about the various houses that were involved in this plot. But you didn't have to talk to him. In fact, I didn't talk to him very much. I didn't read very much of that. Because I don't know, I'm always in favor of, put the vital information in. If information is not vital but is still good to have in there, make it optional.
Yeah, which I think they've done. And I think that authors could learn a lot from that because sometimes people overwrite. I've seen that in some Foundry missions that I play through that I don't end up reviewing because I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about overwriting when I'm talking about a specific person's mission necessarily. I want to just talk about it as a general rule, as a general, not rule, but as a general topic of conversation. So what other ways can you guys think of to possibly adapt and use that as ways to increase your story through optional interactive dialogue and such?
Well, one thing is to do it outside the game. I have on occasion, back when I was doing my at the very beginning of the Foundry, when I was doing my big series, I actually created backstories for the characters in it that don't appear in the missions anywhere. I made them up. I went into Photoshop and made it look like there was a, like a datapad entry with the character's picture, their backstory, and a little sort of graphics designed to look like a pad outside of it. And I posted those on Starbase UGC. None of that information is in the story except for little tidbits about people's backgrounds just mentioned in passing.
Right.
It's not necessarily vital information. You get all the vital information in the mission. But I've seen other things like that, like we did for Purity, where we had that interview with, it was like a movie interview with the actor playing, who was it? Was it Paller?
Yeah.
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 I thought that was pretty funny. So I mean, you can do things outside of the game. And they're there for the people who are interested in it, and if you're not interested in it, if you just want to play the mission, you can just play the mission.
So
that's a thing I hadn't even thought of.
I was going to say, what did you think of the Cryptic Dev blogs leading up to Season 8?
The lore blogs. I liked them. Yeah. I thought they were pretty cool. I did too.
I liked them a lot.
And I hope that the thing with the ship that's way far out there is followed up on in-game somewhere. I know there's been some complaints on things involving the Enterprise F, the stories that are appearing in Star Trek Magazine, that those are not available, that we don't get any of that in-game. And I can certainly see that. I would like to see more of the Enterprise F in-game.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a danger in sort of overdoing that aspect of information outside the game.
I've developed a different take on that. The stories that are appearing in Star Trek Magazine for the Enterprise F crew, that's basically the next generation kind of thing, is what they've got going on, and we're not interacting with them in the game. We're in the same universe, and very occasionally, actually, if all of this is happening in a year, we run across every other week. But
you're right, and it is supposed to be our story, right? We're not playing the Enterprise F story. We're playing our own story.
I feel like they're saying, if you want the Enterprise F story, go buy Star Trek Magazine, drop $5 a month on us, or something.
Yeah, and it's not that we don't run into the Enterprise F every once in a while. I mean, they were just in Sphere of Influence.
That's
People were not happy about Captain Sean ordering them around.
I remember seeing
I'm a Vice Admiral. Gosh darn it. Of course, we had that in Purity too. When on Zorbane's mission, when you go on the bridge of the Resnick, and Paller is basically ordering you around to help out. My thought was, I'm on his ship. He's in command of his ship. And even if I'm some high and mighty admiral, the thing is blowing up around me. I think I'm going to lend a hand.
So, it's one of those weird enigmas about Star Trek Online, is we're all vice admirals, but we're really only captains.
But we're not all necessarily vice admirals.
No, but we're treated as captains.
Right. And I get nitpicked a little bit on mine, because most, the other authors used the rank bracket.
Yeah.
And you
in
just
their dialogue. I don't use it. I call everybody captain when they're captain of their ship. It's just habit. I heard a couple of people say, well, I wasn't called by my rank. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things I kind of had to concede.
It's one of those things that each Foundry author sort of has to decide for themselves which one to use.
Honestly, it's funny because a while back, Thomas the Cat was joking around that he wanted to demote everyone to captain, except that Geko wouldn't let him. I told him that we needed a mission in this game that where the player defies orders and gets demoted. That's how you get everyone down to captain who's been a vice admiral.
Because looking at it in hindsight, it might have been better to have captain be the end game.
Yeah,
I think in hindsight it would have been start with actual ensigns, go through lieutenant.
Nobody wanted to be the admiral. Everyone wanted to be the captain.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And don't you do anything that lets them promote you off the bridge of that ship.
That's
That in
right.
this game, they promote you into the next...
I was going for the Eddington quote where he says, nobody joined Starfleet to be a security officer. They joined Starfleet to sit in that chair. Or something like that.
Love that character.
That was a great character.
Yeah.
I always had him in mind when I was writing dialogue for Garfield Pallor.
Yeah.
Huh.
I could see that.
It's a bit of an Eddington character.
Yeah.
We sort of wandered away from where we were. Season 8 storytelling devices.
No, I was thinking about the dev blogs, and I'm wondering if something like that wouldn't work for like a Foundry mission, because I mean...
We certainly have outlets for that, like Starbase UGC, of course, which just about anybody can get on and become a contributor on and post those things. Yeah. We'd love to have them.
It's a shame.
The sign up is a little bit wonky. At least it was when I signed up, because...
just join the chat room, we will walk you through it if you have an issue.
Yeah. No, there's no special, weird thing you have to do in order to sign up to contribute. It's just, the sign up is a little bit wonky, and I don't think it sends out the, confirmation properly.
Right. You know what you have to do, actually? You have to go back in and use the forgot password thing, and it'll send you a new email with the info.
Yeah.
That's the workaround.
But I know it took me forever.
For Foundry authors, we should know about workarounds.
It took me forever to become a contributor because I kept waiting for someone to approve me.
You know what I think?
And also you could just post it right on the forums as well.
Yeah.
We're prohibited from using links in the dialogue.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to link a site to, while the player is playing.
They can't, though. I mean, they can't
I think that just kind of opens them up for too much.
Oh, yeah.
I wish we could, but unfortunately it's one of those things we can't have because there are people
right, the abuses.
Sure.
Yeah, originally when I was planning out the 3 parts, I wanted to have a special reward for the end, depending on what choice you made at the end. And I had thought about having a special duty officer where what I did was, instead of trying, actually giving you a duty officer, I linked you to the costume file for the whatever duty officer you ended up getting. Unfortunately, we can't post links, and so that idea fell apart once I found that out, but that would have been, I always thought that would be kind of cool. So you go get
I know people have done rewards or something like that where if people do a special set of things at the end of the mission, it gives you a code. Said, you found the secret area or whatever it is, and it gives you a little code and says, email me this code and I'll send you your reward.
That's pretty cool.
But I've seen how many people have played part 1. That might be a little dangerous.
We make it really hard to find.
No. I don't know. Maybe I'll do some, or put up some, behind the scenes stuff leading up to part 2 or something.
Get people interested and hyped up for part 2.
And remembering it before they play part 2, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Release a previously on trailer.
Not even, I don't know. I've got a couple of ideas.
Of course, having played part of your mission, I'd say you do have a previously on that goes through the plot rather well, I thought.
Yeah.
It's a pretty cool idea.
I was thinking of, the story of a character you meet in part 2 that you'll realize what it is once you get to that part, but you don't need to know it in order to do the story.
I should say, Hippie has kind of done this, haven't you? You did a little Miranda Mayhem, mini fanfic, didn't you? Before you started making missions?
Yep, I did. I wrote a little tiny, what she did during the summer event, before I released any missions with Miranda Mayhem in them.
So yeah, I mean, I'd say there's things you can do outside of the game that can be fun. I was thinking of, for my relaunch of the Descent series that I talked about earlier, I was thinking about making a whole website for it.
Nice.
With, character bios and I don't know what else I can put on there. Trailers, graphics, screenshots, all kinds of different things. I don't know. Well, I'm still thinking on that part.
You can embed sound files. You can do all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Give people I know Casmodian likes to include playlists. So this is the music you should be listening to while you play this mission.
No, must have all Star Trek soundtracks before playing missions.
Well, I'll say this, you can find just about any music you could possibly think of on YouTube these days.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Anything else on season 8 storytelling topics?
No, that was it. I wanted to just talk about, putting things outside of what is normal for finding story. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know I like to kind of leave hints and clues. I mean, anytime I can get the player to jump to a conclusion versus me telling them what the conclusion is
mm-hmm.
It's a magical thing.
We should say that Cryptic does appear to be sort of slowly revealing some of the story here.
Mm-hmm.
You get it slowly through the rep system, and then there's areas that we know that they're working on that they haven't put in yet of the sphere. So I think there's more to come as far as season 8 story.
One last shout out to the Foundry poll. We will put a link in the show notes.
Go vote.
The Foundry assets. Go vote. With the more people we get to vote for this, the better.
The more weight it will carry.
Oh yes. And if you want this to be representative of as much of the community as we can, go vote. Good night.
Good night, everybody.